Ahoy there mateys, Kraken Week is here. This is a joint collaboration by a bunch of creators to focus on ocean and seafaring TTRPG topics this week to mirror Shark Week on that one TV channel. But we all know that Krakens are way cooler than sharks, so I'm expecting Kraken Week to quickly become the more popular cultural trend. It's only a matter of time. One thing that's always bothered me about 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is the lack of subsystems and mechanics for ship-to-ship combat. 5e is primarily a hand-to-hand and short-distance combat game. For example, let's take a look at the piss-poor combat rules in revised Spelljammer. Actually, I don't want to put you to sleep by reading these, so let me sum up. One PC pilots the ship and the rest fire cannons. Then it basically implies you should move the ships close enough to each other to board and have regular good old apple pie, melee, and spell combat. But the problem is, having only a navigator and a ballista operator just leaves too little to do for the rest of the party. You shouldn't always have to pilot the ships toward each other to turn it into regular combat, and it doesn't matter if it's at sea, or in space, or in big battle mechs on land. It would be very nice to have enough roles for the party to play to make everyone feel like they have something to do on their turn. Because we all know missing your turn or having nothing to do on your turn in combat is super lame. In Ghosts of Saltmarsh, there are rules for ship-to-ship combat that are slightly better than what's in Spelljammer. Here it describes the take aim action, which gives the next ballista or cannon attack advantage. Also the full speed ahead action, which you can use to temporarily add distance to the ship's speed. But these still aren't enough. I don't mean to trash Ghosts of Saltmarsh, I actually like a lot about it. If you want to learn more, check out a video by my fellow Kraken Week contributor Ryan Doyle from the Verdigree Table. I'll link to his stuff and some other good ones at the end of this video. But first, since I have you, could I get a like and subscribe below? It only takes a second. Make sure to click all next to notifications. So let's talk about my ideas for subsystems for ship-to-ship seafaring combat. Although most of these could easily be adapted for spell jamming or mech battles too. And I want to focus on mechanics that do not require the ships to run right up to each other for boarding. To do this, we need to lean on character classes' strengths. For example, what do warlocks, wizards, and sorcerers do well? They fling spells. So here's my first suggestion, spell amplifier stations. The main problem with casting offensive spells aboard a ship is that the enemy ship is probably too far away. If they come within 150 feet, you can drop a fireball on them, but a smart captain would just stay 160 or more feet away. So you add magical circles or devices to a ship that can amplify spell distance. Basically, you give ships a version of the distant spell metamagic option that sorcerers have. And I think to make it interesting, we should turn it into a point system. Let's say that a spell amplifier station comes with 10 or 15 amplifier points. You can use 1 point to double the distance of a spell, or to turn a touch spell into a spell with a range of 30 feet. Or you can spend 2 points to triple the distance. Each point invested increases the distance by 100% of the base. So if that enemy ship is 400 feet away, we'll need to spend 2 amplifier points to turn the fireball's range from 150 feet to 450 feet. Or let's say the enemy ship is 200 feet away and our mage wants to use telekinesis to yank their cannon operator into the water. With a normal range of 60 feet on telekinesis, our mage could pump 3 amplifier points into the spell to give it a range of 240 feet. Now basically our spellcasters can function normally as they would in combat, but they have this added dimension of amplifier points to manage as a resource. If you have multiple spellcasters in the party, you can have multiple stations on the ship, or maybe there's only one station and they have to share a pool of amplifier points between them, so now they get to plan their turns together. My next subsystem is what I call the Magic Shield Operator. Hang on, this will take a minute to explain because I'm going to have to take a diversion here into late 1980s anime. When I was a preteen, my favorite show on TV was Robotech, especially the Macross Saga. If you haven't seen it, it's a show about a big ship in space fighting bad guys, basically. Anyway, my memory about the show is a little hazy, but I recall there was an episode when they were deep in space and running out of resources. The big shield protecting the ship was waning, and they couldn't deploy it all the way around the ship, so they devised what they called the pinpoint barrier system. Instead of one big shield, they localized their shield into small, mobile force fields that can move around to block individual attacks from the enemy. And they assigned members of the crew to sit at consoles with a video game-like interface, frantically moving the pinpoint shields around to block enemy attacks. Okay, thank you for your patience. Now let's explain how this magic shield would work in a TTRPG. I think you can assign this shield operator role to someone in the party, give the ship a magic shield, and then divide the ship up into segments. Give that player a map of the ship with it drawn into sections like this. It can have however many sections you want, but it should match a die like either 4, 6, 8, 12, you get the idea. Because what's going to happen is your shield operator is, on their turn, going to deploy the shields to a specific number of segments. Like, this round I will send the shields to areas 3, 7, and 8. Then the enemy cannons fire and each attack gets a die roll equal to the number of segments. If it lands on a segment covered by the shield, the attack either misses or the magic shield operator can roll some kind of defensive die to reduce the incoming damage. Now let's talk about the person driving the ship. I do like the Ghosts of Saltmarsh mechanic of full speed ahead to give the ship a speed boost, but we can do more than that. I think you could give the ship a series of maneuvers to add some complexity to its movements. Things like speed boost, quick turn, hard to port or starboard, lean and tilt. Like the amplifier points for the Amplifier Stations, we would give each ship a number of maneuver points in combat, say 20. Then speed boost costs 2 points, quick turn costs 4, hard to port or starboard costs 3, and lean and tilt costs 5. Each of these maneuvers has a DC attached to pull it off, and if the driver is successful, they get to narrate what it looks like and then add a die roll to the ship's armor class or damage threshold for that turn. Also, I think it would be useful for any ship in combat to have a sort of project manager role. This would be what we used to call a floater in the restaurant business. That's the person available to handle all the miscellaneous tasks. Maybe this is a good role for the party's healer, like the cleric. It's their job to provide immediate triage and tending to the wounded on board. Because if a ship has a crew, some of them are going to sustain injuries, right? So your project manager treats the wounded, then also is responsible for tending to the sails or organizing crew to fix a hole in the ship from a cannon blast. Give your project manager an NPC crew. In each round, they can assign the crew to specific tasks. As an example, let's say we're deep in combat. Enemy ballista bolts have shredded the sails, and so our ship's speed has been reduced. Also, a cannon blast tore a hole in the lower deck, so the ship is going to flood in 3 rounds. Also, enemy shrapnel has wounded 3 of our runners, so there's no one available to go down to the cargo hold to bring up more bolts for our ballistas. Okay, project manager, you have 6 available NPC crew members working under you. Where are you going to send them this round? Then the player says, I'll send 2 to patch the sails, 1 to drag the wounded to the lower deck, and 3 to the cargo hold to get more ammunition. We'll deal with the hole in the ship next turn. And then the project manager rolls dice for each of these groups, and the results tell us how successful they were at managing the team. And then obviously you'll have your weapon operators, ballista, mangonels, tractor beams, whatever. The thing I don't like about how ship weapons operate is that they generally take 2 people, 1 to load and 1 to fire. The PC assigned to loading is going to have a pretty boring combat. So I would do away with that loading person and instead make loading into a die roll. Like if the ballista operator passes a sleight of hand check with a DC of 15, then they can successfully load and fire the weapon in a single turn. And I would probably make 1 PC in charge of more than 1 weapon so they get multiple tries per turn. So here are some final thoughts. You'll note I didn't get into point-by-point specifics with a lot of these subsystems, because my intent with this video was more to give you examples of roles as inspiration. As the GM, you're going to need to tailor your encounters for the party makeup and also the type of ship involved. Lean into your PC's abilities and design roles and challenges that fit with them, and especially reward creative ideas. Like if you have a druid in the party and they want to spend a wild shape to add dolphin fins to the ship to give it a speed boost, say yes to that, because that would be a dope narrative moment. Because the point is to have fun, and the players will have more fun if everyone has a role and is allowed to flex their creative muscles. As part of Kraken Week, there are a whole bunch of other creators out there currently flooding YouTube with ocean and seafaring content. I already mentioned my buddy Vertigree Table, but also check out the Aboleth video from my friend Brad Wolf at Direden. And shout out to Ginny D and Pointy Hat for making this whole thing happen. And until next time, this is GM Jim, now avast me hearties and hoist that jib, you bilge-sucking wharf rats!